We are going to talk digital adaptation, something that the Chamber has been a huge advocate for over the course of this pandemic, and how you can boost your business with transformative technology, sponsored by Digital Manitoba Initiative. And our moderator for this session is a good friend of mine, Nicole Harris, the founder and CEO of Maverick Media Solutions. For 15 years, Nicole has worked as a journalist, producer, and television news anchor in Canada for Rogers TV, Astral Media, which of course is now Bell, and Chorus Entertainment. Today, Nicole and her team at Maverick Media love to bubble up the goodness around their clients' success with solid local and national PR, and they also partner with their clients to prepare them to be crisis ready through training, consulting, and strategic communications. Nicole has consulted with and trained brand leaders like H&M, Lego, Mercedes-Benz, RBC, the Consulate General of Iceland, and small and medium businesses have benefited from Nicole's media expertise and strategic communication services, including the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. And a fun fact, everybody likes fun facts about Nicole, is that she loves to take her family vacations as golf trips. She's golfed along the Firth of Forth in Scotland, teed up at the former DuPont Mansion along the coast of Cuba, and was actually chased by a crocodile in Mexico while playing a twilight round of golf. Nicole, welcome to the stage this morning, and she will introduce our next panel. Nicole.
Thank you so very much, Chuck. Thank you. Well, who knew I'd have to take a mulligan on the course because of a crocodile, but it did happen. Yes. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so very much for joining us today. I'm very excited to be here to help moderate your panel on digital adaptation and how we can really help drive business forward with technology in the province. And we're living in really exciting times here right now because technology is such a game changer. And it's really changing the way we think, changing the way we work. It's not just about the technology, though. And yes, you can set up servers, network, an online e-commerce platform, but adapting and embracing technology in your business is really about so much more than that. There's a whole ecosystem underneath that that has to support what you're doing on the technology side. And so we're going to explore that today with our amazing panelists that I'll introduce you to here shortly, who are going to help us take a look at cybersecurity, what awareness you need, tools, tips, techniques to help protect you in your business. And also, more importantly, give your customers confidence that you've got this. You're collecting their data and you're protecting it, which leads us to another part of our discussion today, is going to be around legal issues. Yes, there's legal issues around everything we do in technology. And it's really important as a business leader to be aware of that and to implement that, thread that into your business. And other strategies and planning for IT we're going to look at as well. I was looking at the Manitoba Digital Initiative lately as I was preparing for this today, and some really interesting facts bubbled up to the top, and I'd like to share some of them with you today. So 2 stats, 46% of businesses are looking to start selling online in the province, and 40% of businesses are going to be expanding or improving their tech infrastructure. So if this is any of you, congratulations, you've come to the exact right place, because our panelists are going to do a deep dive to help you boost your business safely and effectively with technology. Another interesting note was that the Chamber staff, Manitoba Chamber staff, they fielded hundreds and hundreds of conversations with a lot of businesses across the province around digital adaptation. And there were some common themes there that they heard and listened to and are embracing. Many businesses did have a game plan and they knew how they were going to transition into technology. That's great. What they struggled with was the how. A lot of businesses were like, how are we going to embrace technology and do it safely and effectively? And so that's what our panelists are here to help us with. And I'd like to introduce each of them to you. Each of them will do a 5-minute presentation, and then we'll do a round of questions with them. So they're going to give you the news you can use around how to adopt technology into your business and drive business forward safely and effectively. First up, I'd like to introduce you to Kent Smith. And Kent, hello, Kent. Kent is the consulting CIO, Chief Information Officer of ourCIO. Kent works with executives to help drive technology forward for their business. And he's really focused on leveling the playing field across the province for small and mid-sized businesses. And he does that by helping them with their IT strategy, their planning, decision-making, and digital adoption. And I love the fun facts. I'm all about that. So a fun fact about Kent is that he started his first business at 16. He was a DJ throughout the province. And at 16, his parents had to drive him to all the socials that he was DJing at. And he was the very first person to use, that we know of, to use a computer to DJ a social in Manitoba. And who knew, Kent, that all these years later, two of your passions, business and tech, would lead you to where you need to be today. So welcome, Kent. And we also have Sylvia de Sousa joining us. Sylvia is a partner at TDS Law, and her focus is on business law with a real strong emphasis on intellectual property and technology law. Her practice covers intellectual property transactions, cannabis advertising and marketing, intellectual property protection, and that includes everything from trademarks, copyrights, patents, and licensing matters. And Sylvia is also a trademark agent. And an interesting fact about Sylvia is she's really big into math puzzles, and she likes to do them before she goes to bed at night. And I think that's a solid strategy. Very good, smart. And she's also the youngest member of her knitting group. And this is perfect, Sylvia, because you can help us unravel the myths and misconceptions about how we adopt technology into our businesses safely and effectively. And last but not least, we have Eddie Phillips. He's the president of Shield Networks. And Eddie has worked for over 25 years in the IT sector with Fortune 500 companies like Texas Instruments, AT&T, and Microsoft. And today with Shield Networks, him and his team are making sure that companies, I love this, are locked, loaded, and ready to thrive in our ever-changing cybersecurity landscape. And here's a really fun fact about Eddie. He actually sent me the video on this. I said, are you serious? Really? He was a rodeo bullfighter for 12 years. A rodeo bullfighter. So that means he was protecting all the rodeo riders in the ring right during the rodeos. And he hung up his spurs in 2008 and started his first business. And thank goodness you're out of the ring, Eddie, and you're here with us today to help our businesses, really thrive, and that we're locked and loaded, and that we can adapt digital technology, but do it safely and effectively. So first up, we'll hear from Kent, and Kent's going to share a little bit about expertise and his knowledge on the opportunities that really exist in leveraging your business with technology and how we do that safely. Kent, the floor is yours.
Good. Thanks, Nicole. And probably like all of us, I'm realizing this is the first time I've had a mic in my hand in probably 2.5 years now, besides like a little one dangling from my earpiece, but it's good to be here. And to be up here with this panel for sure. But as Nicole mentioned, and she did introduce what a CIO is a little bit, I want to expand on that. I think it just helps set an understanding as to the perspectives I'm bringing forward, some of the observations I'm certainly seeing in the marketplace here in Manitoba. The CIO typically does stand for Chief Information Officer, but really what it's meaning is the ultimate head or the executive that is responsible, or the ultimate decision maker with respect to IT. Or digital technology within an organization. And ultimately, they're the working executive that is entrusted in driving digital technology forward within that organization. And really what I see a CIO being exceptional at is bridging the gap between technology and the business and technology. They're business folks that have a very good business understanding, strong business acumen, and very much the same on the technology front of things. Often have climbed the ranks through the technology side of things, making them a really good bridge to align technology with the needs of the business as it needs today, but also understanding what it's needing tomorrow and helping that whole future-proofing exercise. So as a CIO, I actually work through a firm called ourCIO, as Nicole mentioned, and ourCIO is a growing community of CIOs like myself or IT executives for hire. really purpose-built to level that playing field, as Nicole mentioned, in the small, medium enterprise space or with small, mid-sized businesses. Historically, and where I come from, and a lot of the CIOs that are on our team come from, is from that larger business executive space. And they've seen the value that they can add. They've very much been needed in that business, that larger business space. But small, medium business has been underserved in this aspect for a long time and have not been able to bring a CIO level executive onto the team. The salaries are prohibitive. Probably there's just not even the workload that's needed there. And we really saw an opportunity to help, because the need has always been there, to bring that type of skill set into that small, mid-sized business. But to help also share where I'm coming from, we're not a vendor at all, or we certainly try not to be a vendor by any means. We're not a reseller. We don't sell servers. We don't sell security solutions. We're 100% independent on purpose. We want to remain 100% impartial. So we can act in the best interests of those organizations that we're working with as their CIO. When I should also mention, I'm quite excited about this. I've always been very fond of the CIO profession and just IT in general in Manitoba, but also across Canada. And I'll be coming on as the president of the CIO Association of Canada here in Manitoba this summer. When I think, applause, thank you. When I think of IT and something with the businesses we work with, I try to conceptualize it a little bit differently. And I almost form it into 3 buckets. And I don't know if this is a perfect way of looking at it, but it seems to help me and helps others, is looking at technology as run, grow, and transform. And I'll define that a little bit. Run is probably what we would understand mostly about technology. It's where our minds typically go to. It's the blinky light stuff that has a cable plugged into it, our computers, our servers, our network. And also the IT support mechanism that we have in place as well to keep our users and our technology running. But it's very much the utility side of IT, or the plumbing, if you want to look at it that way. And it just has to work. And organizations in Manitoba, we're generally doing this fairly good. We've had to, over a lot of years, we have adopted computers and networks and that infrastructure in our business, and we just need the lights to be on and working. And so we might have a small internal IT team that is providing some focus to that, or we're working with an outside third-party IT service provider as well. But where I'm really seeing a shift, and this shift has been happening nationally for some time, but really just here in Manitoba, starting to pick up now, is getting into that grow and transform aspects of IT. And by grow, I'm not looking at anything complicated here. This is really just about leveraging technology for more within your organizations. It's about continuous improvement. It's about moving forward, maturing, optimizing what you already have in place. And with transform, and especially in an era where businesses are going through rapid change, where industries are getting disrupted, it's about using technology far more strategically, or just even strategically at any level, and looking at it as an enabler or as a differentiator for your organization. How can it truly set you apart from your competition and make you a leader in your industry? It's using it to pursue new opportunity. And this is unfortunately really in that grow and transform place where businesses in Manitoba have struggled a little bit, just because we're not built that way. We don't have that capacity in-house at this point in time. And really a lot of work with what we're trying to do with businesses here in Manitoba. Lastly, I was asked to speak about our business technology assessment. It's certainly catching the eye of different government levels and industry associations, and certainly has been wonders for the organizations that we've worked this for, and we've done this for several dozen now in the province. The business technology assessment, it offers a small mid-sized business access to a CIO for about a 4-week period, where they're going to come in and really immerse themselves in your organization and understand what your business is about, what you do, the industry challenges and business challenges you're dealing with, and provide an objective review of really how your business is leveraging technology. That CIO will identify strengths and frankly what you're doing fairly well already to give you some confidence around that, but give focus and bubble to the surface, if I use Nicole's saying there, the gaps and the challenges that you're dealing with, and identify those opportunities to help you overcome them and reshape your organization for what you're trying to accomplish in the future. And that CIO will identify very clear and actionable recommendations that make a plan for you to run with going forward. We really enjoy doing these as CIOs. It's an opportunity to get to know new businesses and meet new business owners and their executive team. But really, it's because it's a great future-proofing exercise and an alignment exercise for the organization. And we really love the immediate value that organizations get out of this. And that's really what's helping that optimizing that run side of things, but giving that focus and helping organizations transition into that grow and transform aspect of IT. And I'll stop there. So thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Appreciate that. You know, your national association is not only getting an amazing IT specialist, they're in great hands, but they're also getting a wicked DJ. They're going to have some good parties there. Tell you that much. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Next up, we're going to hear from Sylvia. And this is really, I find it very interesting, and I find it super important too, along with everything else we're discussing today, because it's things that maybe we don't necessarily think about when we're running a business, but it's very important. And it's important for you, for peace of comfort and mind, that you're doing everything right in your business, for your team, for your employees, and for your customers. So we're going to hear from Sylvia on the legalities of adopting tech into your business. And so things like whether you're running an online, selling online, or running a SaaS business or an active website, the things that we really need to pay attention to, like the terms of use, statements, and protection. Sylvia, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you very much for having me. Believe it or not, legal agreements in this sphere could increase the value and boost the value of your business. If you have an online presence, there's 3 agreements that you need to have. Number 1 is terms of use. Number 2 is privacy policy. And number 3 is the end user license agreement. And for short, we call that ULIS. How do each of these agreements help increase the value of your business? If you have a website, you want to have terms of use on that website. Usually it's a unilateral contract. And in that contract, you're going to have some key clauses. Ownership of the IP that's on your website. So if you have videos, you have content, you've got photographs, you've got designs, trademarks, you want to make it very clear to the users that go onto your website that you are the owner, and that certainly they could look at it and they could use it for personal use, but they're not to use it for commercial use. Also, you want to have a governing law clause. So if there's ever a problem, a dispute, you want to be making your arguments either before an arbitration board or a court in Manitoba. That'll decrease your legal fees, decrease your litigation costs. But more importantly, if you have an active website where your users are providing user content, things like photographs, videos, content, blog posts, you should ask yourself, who owns that user content? And if you're not the owner of that user content, do you have a license to use that user content? And you may be thinking, well, how does your user content help increase the value of my business? If you want to use the user content to improve your systems, the user experience on your website, you can't just go and use your users' content without having the right to do that. And either you're the owner and therefore you have the right to do that, or you're a licensee who's given the right to do that. And so where do you get these rights? These rights are in the terms of use. And so that's a very critical provision in that document. With respect to the second type of document that you need is a privacy policy. As most of you know, users, consumers, clients, we're all concerned about our personal information and our privacy. And so even though it's not required by law to have a privacy policy on your website, you want to be indicating to your users, your clients, your customers that you care about their personal information, that you care about protecting that personal information and their privacy. And in order to be able to do that, you have a privacy policy that they could access and read as to how you're protecting their personal information. So another critical document. The third document that I would suggest is super critical are for those businesses that have a SaaS platform, software as a service platform, or a mobile app. And most of you know what I'm talking about, even though you may not think you know what I'm talking about. Most of us have downloaded an app, for example, or have gone onto, let's say, a photo site so they can make their photo books. And that would be a software as a service platform. And when you go onto the app or the platform, a box pops up and you see a bunch of little tiny words. And in order for you to continue downloading the app or use the platform, you're forced to accept. At the bottom, you'll see a button, I accept. Well, what you're accepting is an end user license agreement. It's a EULA. And if you have a mobile app or a SaaS platform, you need to have that if you want to be increasing the value of your business. And the way you do that is data. Data is cutting edge. In the old days, you would have all of this data coming into your business, but you did not have the technology or the algorithms to be able to interpret that data and produce useful, readable, helpful results or reports, for example. That's changed. Now we have the technology, we have the algorithms that are able to read all of the data that you're getting from your users, that raw data that's coming in. And that technology is now able to produce a report, results, trends that are going to be useful, that you could use in your business to improve your systems, the user experience, or that you could maybe sell to third parties in the financial industry, the agriculture industry, the insurance industry, healthcare industry, industries that may want to get access to the useful results, reports, trends that you're able to produce. You can't just go willy-nilly and use the user raw data or the results. You need to be either an owner of either or a licensee, a user who has the right to use the data that you're acquiring from your users, for example. And so where do you get that right? The permission to be able to use the data either internally or as a way of monetizing it and generating another stream of revenue for your business. That's through the EULA. You have to have strong licensing provisions and ownership provisions in the EULA that would give you that right to go ahead and do that. And that would help you then maybe develop another income stream for your business. So those are the three documents that you should have. And the last point that I want to make is just to remind everyone, when this law came into place, there was a lot of discussion, but I've recently have not seen this talked about, but the spam legislation. We all know we have it. A lot of you are marketing to your consumers or your clients or your users. Just note that the spam legislation exists. You cannot be sending messages or emails to people unless you have consent. There's two types of consent: express consent, which is the best consent from the user, for example, or implied consent, which is based on business relationships, but very limited. And there's the laws explain what that means. If you realize now that, oh, I should probably get express consent, sending an email after my talk asking for that express consent would be a no-no, because you don't have the consent to be able to send it to the person asking for express consent unless you have the implied consent. And so just be careful on that. And then when you are sending messages, because you do have the correct consent, just be aware that the spam legislation requires that certain things be in the email, for example, that you're sending out, so you're not offside the legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia. That was very super interesting. So there's a lot to think about, and you're seeing the big picture here now of how all these puzzles fit together. When you're adapting technology, there's more than just setting up servers, networks, and an online selling platform. There's all these things to think about. And so we're so happy to have our panel here. We're going to hear next from Eddie. And he's going to help Sherpa guide us along to how we protect all that data. So Eddie, help us out with that.
Very good. Thanks, Nicole. So my name is Eddie Phillips. I am the cybersecurity evangelist for Shield Networks. When you're the co-owner or co-founder, you get to make up your own cool titles. Anyways, I'm also thrilled and happy to be here to talk to everybody here, to Manitoba companies online. It's yeah, absolutely my pleasure. If I could do this every day, all day, this is what I would be doing. But I want to draw your attention to what we're doing right now. The environment has changed. Even though restrictions around COVID have gone away, we're still doing this online. Typically, a couple of years ago, most of everybody would be in this room. And in our industry, we call that spreading out the risk surface. And in English, that means we're basically opening up the way that we interact, the way that we do business on the internet that leaves us open toward attacks from cyber criminals that are on the internet. And the question I get a lot from businesses is, why me? Right? Why me? Nicole just shared at the beginning of this, all of those businesses that are going to be beginning to sell online. And so if you're going to be selling anything from, earrings to software, like why you? Why would a cyber criminal bother? And I have a very, very great answer to that question. And a lot of it is because really cyber criminals aren't necessarily concerned about your data, although in some cases they are. What they're concerned about is the fact that you're concerned about your data. And the idea around that is that if a cyber criminal can separate you from your data, right? What does that mean to us? That means we can't service our clients. We can't pay our employees. We can't keep the doors open. And so at the end of the day, if we can't do those types of things, it puts us in that emotional state where we want to fix the problem, right? We react when we can't do what we need to do. And specifically, I'm talking about things like ransomware, where you get infected and someone infiltrates your business and you can't run your business. You can't do your job. And so then what happens is it leads companies to do things like paying these cyber criminals, which just propagates the business model for them and does not do anyone any favors. So I'm excited today to talk about different ways that we can help out businesses. But I also want to address is, how does this happen? Like, how can, think about what you're seeing in the news. We see the big pipeline hack that happened, $600 billion or whatever, $600 million or whatever it was. And then we hear about hospitals and we hear about police stations all getting attacked. But why would they bother with a mom and pop shop or even a small and medium-sized business? Well, I have to say it's because they've made it easy for themselves. Cyber criminals have gone, if you're in manufacturing and you know the lean concept, oh man, they own the lean concept, because here's what happens. The cyber criminal ecosystem, if you will, is so huge that there are actual cyber criminals dedicated to developing malware, so software that can attack you, and that's all they do. So they actually have a quote unquote dark web marketplace where other cyber criminals or state-sponsored hackers can go and purchase these, and then what they're good at is actually infiltrating businesses. For example, things like infected websites, emails that collect your data or send you an attachment. All of these are very, very common ways that cyber criminals try to infiltrate your business and take your data away. Now, I talked about separating your data from you and impacting your business from almost any kind of corporation or business. And there's another aspect that happens where they are after your information. So if you've got a law firm, or if you've got an accounting firm, or if you're holding any sort of private data, the first step a lot of cyber criminals do is they exfiltrate that data. They steal it, right? And they want to sell it, and they want to take advantage of it. So I'm thrilled today to talk about the different ways that we can help companies defend themselves. And really, what makes us so vulnerable is not only that whole attack automation I talked about, but simply because we need to invest more in cybersecurity. We need to raise that bar. We need to have a consolidated front, whether it be vendors, businesses, service providers, law firms, ourCIO, who does a great job of doing some really great independent stuff to make sure that businesses are protected. We all need to raise that bar because it's not going to get any better. It's not going anywhere. So again, I'm thrilled. I can't wait for the rest of this, the rest of this panel, because you're going to learn something out of this, I guarantee you.
Eddie, we are learning already. I could just listen to you all day long. I love your enthusiasm with the rest of the panel and this great information that they're sharing that is so timely and relevant, especially now. If you ever want to read a great book, it's by Mark Goodman, and it's called Future Crimes. And he's a former FBI agent. Ron at the back is nodding. Yes, yeah. He's a former FBI agent that spent his whole entire career in the FBI just tracking, tracing, and chasing down cyber hackers. And it is quite an eye-opening, revealing read. So add that to the Oprah Winfrey's list of books to read this summer. We're gonna open up now, and thank you for the panel for those insights. Very, very important. We're gonna open up now with a round of questions. So we have a few prepared already here. Let's talk about data, because that really is the currency now, and data is king. And there's all kinds of ways that companies are collecting our data, whether you have an iWatch and it's tracking your steps and your sleep, whether you're online and you're searching and the cookies are following you. You go to a store and you use your loyalty points club card. That's tracking you and collecting your data. So my question is for Sylvia here. As a company, can I use all that data from my customers? And I really want to know, can I monetize it? And how do I do that?
Thank you, Nicole. So the big answer is yes, you can, but there's limitations on certain data. So for all the businesses that are acquiring data, first step that you need to do is to identify whether each piece of data, and it is time consuming, and there's businesses that have data that hire people just to deal with the data. But every piece of data, you have to identify it as personal information or non-personal information. So you have to categorize it into one of those two camps. If you have personal information, then there are restrictions on how you could use that personal information. And that's where we have privacy legislation. The big privacy piece of legislation for Canada is PIPEDA. Some provinces also have their own provincial privacy legislation. So on the personal information, you got to be careful. There's certain ways of handling that and giving you the right to use that. On the second category, where we're dealing with non-personal information, yes, you could use it, you can monetize it. But as I said before, during when I initially spoke, you have to have the right to use it. And you could either have the right because you're the owner or you're a licensee. And in order to get those rights, you have to have an agreement. So going again back to the EULA, which will put the clauses in there that are going to be accepted by your users, your clients, your customers, where they'll say, I accept. And what they're accepting is either saying that you're the owner, or if you're not the owner of their raw data, then you're a user of your raw data. And then the terms of that license are in that EULA. And then you're going to be able to monetize it.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, and that leads me to a whole host of other questions, which we'll circle back to if we have time. Kent, I'd like to spend a few minutes chatting with you now. You know, you work so closely with Manitoba businesses throughout the province. What have you seen for trends on how businesses are using data and collecting data?
I think when you take a look outside of our province and look globally and look at the big companies that we maybe think of in the tech space, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Elon Musk's Twitter. I mean, these are data companies really, as much as they are platforms. It's all about data for them. They found ways to really leverage that data and mine it and use it for some amazing things. That's what puts money in their pockets. Bringing it a little bit closer to home, I'm a little bit closer, still a little bit broad. I'll even share an example of how much data we give up every single day. I mean, we're giving it up in every time we're accepting a new app install on our phone. Nobody reads the fine print. We all should, but I think we'd all lost time if we were to do that all the time. But even go to a mall here in Winnipeg, And if you see free Wi-Fi and you connect to that free Wi-Fi, yeah, maybe they're giving you a free service. That's a courtesy. But you know what they're also doing is they're watching everywhere you're going throughout that mall, what stores you're going into, how long you're spending there. Do you go to the food court? How long do you spend there? And they're taking this data and they're using it to gain insights, not maybe specifically on you. They're looking at it a little higher level than that, but to make smart, informed decisions in their business. But bringing it into the small, medium business and what we see in Manitoba, we're seeing pockets, and it's actually great. I've really seen it become part of the conversation a lot more in the last, I guess through the pandemic, but maybe the last 5 years, but especially so in the last year or two. And it's starting kind of small. It's great they're having innovation conversations about, well, where could we go with our data? And so it's great that they're having a big conversation on it, but starting more in, well, you know, what are some insights that we could gain that would be very valuable for us? So that might be a retail organization or somebody that has sales of trying to better understand their sales history so they can better understand sales forecasting. A lot on the operational side of things and developing more KPIs or like key performance indicators in just how is your business doing financially and operationally. You know, in some cases I'm seeing in a world where we're getting into IoT or Internet of Things, which is really just connected devices, tracking more data there as well. Just trying to think of a more concrete example than that, but it really does vary by industry for sure. So, and into even the space of preventative and proactive maintenance too, of, you know, here's a history of the last 5 years of this piece of really expensive equipment. And we're starting to see some trends as to when it fails. And so instead of it failing at an unplanned time, let's control this failure because we now have some predictive analytics involved here to say, okay, well, we're maybe coming up to a window where we could expect a failure. So let's get on it now. Let's do this on a weekend that doesn't disrupt our business. So there's some examples, and there's certainly plenty more that we're seeing right here in the Manitoba marketplace.
Yeah, very interesting. A question for you, Kent, is on, I'm sure a lot of you are have gone to genealogy websites, things like 23andMe, which has recently just aligned itself with a very big pharma company that they're sharing data with. So you go and you want to find out, well, a little bit more about, okay, I golfed on the Firth of Forth. Am I related to any of these people out here, and where? From Scotland or wherever. So you go on these websites and you do the spit test, and they take all that information. It's your genealogy, it's your genes, and then they share it with a big pharma company. Who owns that data? Sylvia, you're just chomping at the bit to get this one. Good. So help us understand that, because I think it's a very interesting time for how we're, learning more about ourselves. It's helping us, in the healthcare space, education sectors, technology, but what are we really giving up, and to who?
A very good question that a lot of people don't think about. And it just goes back to what I initially had said. When you have data, which is a type of IP in my mind, there's two ways of handling it. You're either an owner, and if you're not an owner, you want to be a user, which in legal term for a user is a licensee. That doesn't just automatically get created in a lot of instances. So you need to have agreements in place. So with respect to these genealogy websites, you may be bound by terms of use just by being on the website. And in those terms of use, which is a unilateral contract, there may be clauses like any data that you input into our website will be owned by us, or will be owned by you, user, client. But thank you for using our website. Thank you for inputting the raw data, but you're giving me a license to use that data any way I want. I call that full exploitation. And so you really have to read the terms of use, or if there's a SaaS platform or mobile app, the agreement that pops up. If you are concerned about who's going to have access to that data. And if it's full exploitation license, if you've given the company full exploitation right to use your data, that means that if they want to go and do a relationship, a deal with a pharma company, they can. Now, again, remember, you have to look at the personal information and the non-personal information. So the laws will be different for each type, and you would have to categorize it. But it'll come down to the agreements that you don't realize you're accepting for most of us.
Ooh, I have one more question on that. This is super fascinating. So do you ever think we're going to get, and this is for anybody on the panel here to help us understand, do you ever think we're going to get to a space and a place where companies start paying us for our data? And that's open to anybody on the panel to answer.
I haven't seen that yet, but I suspect it is coming. Why? Most of you have probably heard of the GDPR, which is the big privacy legislation in Europe. It came out a few years ago, very strenuous, heavy fines, like millions, 4% of global revenue concepts for fines. So the ramifications of being offside the GDPR legislation could be really hard on businesses. That's Europe. Europe has always been ahead on the privacy, personal information issue. But Canada, we're joining them. We have our privacy legislation. It's the PIPEDA legislation. It's not there, but I know there's amendments being considered and discussed right now on that PIPEDA legislation. And then the US, I mean, in the old days, if I was going to plot the countries or the jurisdictions on a chart, I'd put Europe at the end, extreme. Really, you need to protect privacy, personal information. I put Canada in the middle with the PIPEDA legislation, and then I would put the US at the end, which is basically free for all. You know what? If you're putting your information in, don't expect it to be protected. Anyone could use it, but that's changed in the US. So now California, for example, has its privacy legislation, came within the last few years, and it's as stringent as the GDPR legislation. And there's other states in the US that are going to be replicating and have replicated what California has done. What does that all mean? It means there's a trend towards giving people like us who are putting our personal information, our data into the platforms, into the mobile apps, more rights to try to stop people from using it in a certain way. And so as those laws increase, companies, I think, have to deal with that. And that may be paying people to provide that data.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, let's shift now. We've talked about giving our data. Now let's talk about, as a business, protecting and safeguarding our data. Data is the new currency, and your clients, your customers are going to expect that you're not going to be doing anything to jeopardize their data. So Eddie, my question is for you on the cyber protection. How do I ensure that all that data that I'm collecting as a company is safeguarded and I can sleep at night?
Thanks, Nicole. That's probably the most common question that I get. And it's because I think a lot of people are looking for that silver bullet to protect their company. So you had shared about my past rodeo enterprises. And there's a saying in rodeo where it's not if you get hurt, it's when and how bad. And I have blatantly stolen that, and I use it in cybersecurity all the time. It's not if you get attacked, it's when and how bad. And I think the first step in is to identify what your weaknesses are. You as a business need to understand that risk surface I alluded to earlier. You need to understand how your process works. You need to understand the gaps. You need to understand where you're most likely to be attacked. And that's when you start building those solutions. I would love to be able to sit up in here and say, oh, here's a checklist of 5 things on your way. And then of course I'd be at a job, but you know what I'm saying? So really it takes some reflection on your business. It takes the step of having an audit done. It even takes a step, even if you are the type of business that has an IT provider or you've got an in-house IT company, evaluating that, bringing someone into audit to do what we call a red team evaluation, where they simulate an attack, bringing someone in, I'm not getting paid by ourCIO, I swear, but a company like ourCIO who can come in and have an independent, because here's the thing about, and not to bash my peers, because I'm sure we're guilty of it too, and which is why we work with companies like ourCIO, is that security can often become subjective in terms of your IT provider's experience and their knowledge. So bringing in somebody else to do that kind of interaction with you to identify those areas is key. So again, the short answer is identify your weaknesses first and then build up the defenses.
Okay, makes sense. And because you were in the ring for 12 years, you must be like the $6 million man, had everything rebuilt. I like it. Okay. This one is for Kent. You know, there was a very interesting stat that I found online, and I just don't generally gravitate to statistics, but for some reason, these were really resonating with me. So I'll share this with you. And it was kind of shocking to me. And I've heard this over the years, that we're really not doing enough to spend our resources in as good a places as we can. And in Canada, I heard that the average IT budget ranges from 4 to 8% of a business's annual revenue. And security on that IT is just over 11% of their IT budget. Kent, what are you seeing in Manitoba, and are we spending enough? And if we're not, how much is enough? How much should we be investing in our IT budget for security?
Sure, I'll maybe start by, when we take a look at statistics, I always remember saying once that I think it's 83% of statistics are made up on the spot, or it's 75, I forget the number, but so you have to be careful of them, but I'm a fan of benchmarking and understanding, you know, where is your industry, where is your peers at. And so those are numbers I'm familiar with. Certainly it varies by industry. And if you think you are very much a technology company, that number would be much higher. Your company is technology. Other organizations maybe have very large revenues, and so maybe technology wouldn't quite be that number. But what I'm seeing in Manitoba is that no, we're not to a level of spending to what those baseline numbers are. That I'm not sure would be a North American or Canadian stat. Certainly I see larger numbers outside of the province, but we're getting better at it. And I think sharing numbers like that can be good because it provides some better visibility of, okay, well, that is what the guy down the street's doing, or that organization over there might be spending. And then to bring that into the cybersecurity side of things, once again, it's hard to say, is that enough? I kind of feel like as Manitoba organizations, we're not even spending that to say that it's not enough. But it's not necessarily about spending more money. It's about spending it wisely, carefully. And there's a lot of free things you can do that improve your cybersecurity posture that don't require super expensive solutions or anything like that, that will absolutely game change how you're positioned against something like a cyber threat.
Okay, thank you for that, Ken. I'd like to, we're getting pretty close to the end of our time here today. And a note to the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce, we are going to have to do this again because there are so many questions around this and so relevant and so timely. Can we talk for a bit about open source software? Because a lot of businesses are adopting it. It's an interesting topic because as it's open source, didn't the author intend for it to be shared, modified, and used? But really, what are the risks of using open source software in my business? Who would like to take that?
So open source software is a great idea as a concept, right? So if you're not familiar, open source software is essentially free software online. The whole idea is that you can see the source behind it, you can see how it's built, which is kind of a double-edged sword, right? If you can see what it's doing, you can be fairly confident that it's, so no one's put in code that's going to steal your data. But on the other hand, if you don't know what you're looking at, there's a risk there that you really don't know what the software is doing. So, and then it leads to other issues. Things like support, right? So if it's a customized piece of software, trying to find support can be difficult and expensive, and maybe you may not invest in that, which could leave you open to security holes. Whereas your common off-the-shelf software typically has larger vendors that support it, has someone accountable if something goes wrong. So I think from those perspectives, you really have to be concerned about open source software. I don't know if anybody else has anything else to add.
On the legal side, with respect to open source software, you're not the owner of the open source software. You're going to be a user, a licensee. So what that means is there's going to be license terms that are tied to your use of the open source software. And the way I describe it to my clients is there's basically two categories of open source software licenses. There's the copy left, COPYLEFT, and the other type is what I call the permissive licenses. And so for you as a business, what you need to make sure is that if you are using open source software, which is not a bad thing, you just want to make sure that the license that's tied to your open source, and you may have different types of open source in your business, is a permissive license and not a copy left license. And if it's a copy left license, just look at the terms. And the biggest risk for businesses that use open source software with a copy left license is that any customization that you do to the open source code may not be yours to keep confidential. You're going to be forced to share it with the public. And so the money that you pay for the customization, you're going to share with the public. You can't keep it as a trade secret. You can't keep the source code as a trade secret. So everybody gets to use it. And that's a problem.
Ah, okay. Very, very interesting. Thank you, Sylvia. We're going to sneak in one. Can we sneak in one last question? No. Okay. Thank you, Chuck. I thought we were on to 12:45. No. Okay. Well, okay. Cloud computing, because everybody's in the cloud now or migrating to the cloud. Okay. So cloud computing, big benefit for companies. A lot of businesses are using it. It boosts productivity. And it's really good for saving a lot of time. Kent, what should companies be aware of when they're using and storing their information of their clients on a central-based web hub?
I mean, we could probably have a whole session on this one. So the real quick thing I would probably call for everybody just to give some thought to. Often we think cloud means cheap, and I'm going to take that rumor right off the table. It's not necessarily going to be the more affordable option. And there's also this idea, well, you have to go cloud. And certainly I promote that it's a really strong consideration, but I'm not going to say that that's necessarily the shoe that fits everybody. So it has to be debated in your organization, but you're also handing over your data in many cases to a data source that you want to understand where that is, how is it protected, how is it secured, where is it governed, is certainly another one. And you hear a lot of conversations coming up now about data sovereignty and the soil that it resides on with Patriot Act concerns in the United States and such too. I always just say it's due diligence at the end of the day, like you're considering any decision in your business, but any software decision of, is this a provider that I want to work with, that I have confidence in, and how are you going to go through that due diligence process? You might want to use some form of framework or checklist, frankly, that helps you gain that confidence that, you know, in fact, this organization is very strong at what they do, and I can have confidence that my data is protected and that the system is going to be available when I need to.
Just to add to that really quick, around the security perspective, almost every cloud provider uses what's called a shared security model. And that's a fancy way of saying that they're protecting themselves. So for example, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, they all have the shared model where they're responsible for X. And if you're a user of their service, you're responsible for Y. So they're going to be responsible for the physical security of their hardware, wherever it might be located. They're going to be responsible for the data in storage, so encrypting it, making sure that anybody can't just steal it. But you're going to be responsible for things like protecting your password, enabling things like two-factor authentication, making sure the PC you're using is secure. So you're on the hook for those things. So being aware of that is key before ever moving to the cloud.
Fantastic. And we're really in the techie spirit here, because just like Steve Jobs, there's always one more thing, but not today. We'll continue this conversation. You know, I really want to thank our panel of experts here. They've really been great insights and news that we can all use to help us boost our business and not shy away from tech. We need to move in that direction. It's a game changer. So let's have a quick round of applause for our panelists here today. Fantastic. Thank you.